Oh, Sarah mo kikechigere samsam. Mare.
Mari. Mado.
Oh.
Also let the jump jobs to me in Tapio, man.
Mhm.
No, don't let the teacher do this. I'm going to the say the mother. Should you just be your on the particular Origin budget sounds the both of this. Jared in Babona than the Bagada Rome to the Angel Corona, Sancho Central. Zawala Majala so on the Dahosin or chosen was in the two London was in the lunch was put by Egitan Java Sinjala. So, the name Judo Samana, the name, some to track it you. The name Anate Touch and so to shut up a go Jones.
Dashitele to our Madama friends. I'm so happy to see you.
Last night, Lagong the for the chief Patrick Tondan of the open of the Nambak Tadrup Town or read the Tadrup Sunset One. The number Tadrup Zena Tatso Tondan of Carisenasian. Consume the Jimdre Law me pass, consume the Jimdre Law me pass, and the then you can consume one answer Nando a Chimpochi or Zunging the chicken. Te tamji ya jimje lawa mi bachi dewa ina ju dewa na gewa na juwa ma gewa dunga ina ju ma gewa na juwa yin ba te la tini jimje kunzu lawa mi bachi namba ki tini te kunzu mon tini te cheli te tini ju dewa ju dewa ju tini gewa dunne tini nelo hondam ki tini nelo don nelo ma don tambe dimba don tambe dimba se don tambe dimba nelo de tini ngang so chi tara konjum na nang de tini game ge tambe pa de tamji a semji nang cha zang yin ba semji nang cha zang yin ne ti tini nga de ta cha dang ge lo tambe pa bang ne wa cha dang lo tambe le da ne ni gomja gomja ne ta to nelo ge don tini toni ge ta wa 원담 기딘 바틴 하고는 원담 기딘 하고들 산지에스 대답들 드는 가지고 넘버 따와시 운접도 좀 되는 거 원담도 내로 드는 하고는 산지 봐 일단 가공 나도 추던 데가 다 대여래시 너무 같은 데인 거죠
So last night we spoke about the Buddhist view, and so we said that there is the relative and the ultimate truth and the relative truth. And the relative level, there is karma, and karma is unfailing. And so that means in our ordinary world, many different things appear to us, all the different phenomena that we think are real, that we perceive in this dualistic way. And there is virtue and non-virtue. And so when the infallibility of karma is that when you engage in virtuous action, the result will be happiness. And if you engage in non-virtuous action, the result will be suffering. And so therefore, in the Buddhist practice, when we first create the cause of happiness, which is virtuous action, we practice virtue, and then we come to see the nature of reality, the ultimate truth. And then from that perspective, and one sees that, and all these conventional phenomena on the relative level, virtue and non-virtue, and all these different appearances are nothing else but kind of appearing aspects of the mind, kind of appearing from the mind. And then so are all these thoughts of attachment and anger. And then recognizing that, we abandon these afflictions of attachment and anger as we engage in meditation practice and realize the view of emptiness. And so this is how, according to the Buddhist view, we come from the relative truth of understanding the infallibility of karma to the ultimate truth. So through meditation and recognizing the nature of mind, we come to the ultimate truth and attain enlightenment. So this is what we were basically discussing last night in relation to the Dharma.
Tini tere nga anso tara gong ko, tere gong de zo tara jimba nye ya gong ja, tini te kola tanga chuti kabyon siya, tini ridos.
So yesterday we spoke about this phenomena, and then today we speak about meditation, and so specifically about those foundations of mindfulness.
Ta gong zuji de tini, ta nangbo chubi nani tini, nga chishu chaga gong ja ya. Tini ina ya, ta tingsang de gong de ta chucho koranga nani shubi, mamangi ya di gong de kono keje shi nangba ta, nangba yinba, nangba menba, so mambo ku gong jaka yuba ta tini gong kola, so keja, mambo shibi yoresi. Mazu tara nanchu nani gom jaya te neche de kana kansam neche togo inba. Tela yang korang ke juram dawa chik. Senanda dan do dine korang te tusam gom samsi. Sina tini titani tini nyamni sina jumde. Titani nyamni sina tini gom chik jani. Ta tini chika res. Ta zo tara tingsang ke gom jaya sen titi nga tsangme le lao ra chik dungo ya. Te jitang de gom jaya te yabu re. Yabu pene ju zo ta soso chi senla kangi yu. Tene yang soso chi senla kangi tang lu ki de tang chi na sen ki de tang chi tene gom jaya shene gom. Tene zuwe do ne tene gom jaya ni tara chi nangba ma yin ba tara chupa ma yin ba chu mi na yang tene ali sen ki chi de tang chi de gom jaya ni so yang go yore. Yena nangba gom de tes chepa yang go yore. Nangba gom de kasi mi yu ya mi yu. Lu sen ki de tang za ma yin ba. 리센드 대상자 많이 봐. 카톡에 내로 동담be dimbat도야. 디치드는 미연로 디테스 카이 베레스. 미여데 미소나 디니 좀 나온 공자데 바이나. 디니테 남부 추빈 냠닝하면 뭐요? 요사 말이. 양코 리센드 대상치도 거 내려마. 다른 미여데 다르데 나 상계지 콤팍트 요래 요사면. 디 동남대 저거를 상태는 미여 대정대 공자병원이나 대다 나축한 본 대처여레스 얘네들은 가서 팀바니야 야여 라변대야 되는 그 넘버 추는 제반아 있으면 내가 공농유바 얘네 조바콘 무슨 냠슬링바 얘네 조는 되는 거나한테 뭐한테 제바 유대바 근데 이제는 노비여레서
Meditation is really one of the most important aspects of the Buddhist practice. So nowadays, many people speak about meditation, whether they're Buddhists or not. People are interested in meditation in general. But then the Buddhist meditation is a little bit different. It's really more a kind of a higher level of meditation practice. And there are many different stages to it. And so we have to learn and reflect, and then we meditate. So there's different stages to the practice. So now, also ordinarily, people think of it in quite simple terms. Like it's quite easy, and so maybe they practice because they want to achieve a better health, physical health, or more mental happiness, and then they sit straight and meditate, calming the mind, like calm abiding, and just to kind of calm down and clear away the difficulties. And also, one doesn't have to be a Buddhist to practice that. Many people do that, and it's good to do that. But then the Buddhist meditation is still a little bit different than that. And how it is different is it is different on the basis of the intention, the goal. So when we meditate, according to the Buddhist view, we're not just meditating for physical health or mental happiness, but with the goal, with the intention to become enlightened, to become free from suffering. And then it becomes really a Buddhist practice. And so that is also the quality of those four foundations of mindfulness. So there's all these different levels to it. There's first the motivation for doing this practice, and then there's the application, which is the actual practice. And then at the end, there is dedication.
그러니까 timba 얘기하기 냠네 신 반보 timba 얘기하들 예요 것도 리 timba 얘기를 여봐 조와 timba 얘기를 여봐 센 timba 얘기를 여봐 추 timba 얘기를 여봐 리소스 심지야 되는 timba 얘기야 스타들을 거야 진실을 용어요래서 너도 거 timba 싶어 찍어 치잖아 이는 미리 밑바서 사태 가가요 밑바서 공기자 뭐 웃긴게 여태 계속 제벌 왜 말이야 공기 timba 당 시바디니 집어쳐요래서
And so today we are speaking about those four foundations of mindfulness. So there is the mindfulness of the body, and the mindfulness of feelings, the mindfulness of mind, and the mindfulness of phenomena. And so they each have their own separate explanation. In terms of mindfulness, they are all the same. So they are all about mindfulness, but they're different in their focus. So the focal object, so to speak, is different.
ambo timba hibe musen timba jeans na pena maran jobda 딱 가장 가르치 얘나 나와 한번 가르치 대 나도 저 팀도 분들 팀 생각나 저 팀도는 되게 팀바라고 그래서 남용한 팀바스 오늘 팀도 오늘 지랑 오늘 희사하고 지랑 팀도 오늘 자진 공부 성화인 바스 지랑 거기도 팀도 하니 티 장공 성화인 바스 대 다부터 팀바라고 so
So first this term mindfulness. So it literally really means to remember. So you remember, for example, what you did yesterday. You remember what you did last month. So that's really the very literal meaning of Jianbao in Tibetan, mindfulness, so remembering. And for example, you remember what you did when you meet somebody. You say, you remember that the other day we went to, at that time we had tea together. And then you remember, oh yes, I remember that we had tea together. So that is, you remember something, you know something because you remember it.
다 진시 센서 드니 다 카톡 사발은요. 빙바도 시바니 카톡 나는 다 가래 징거 유바. 가래 징거 유바. 가래 징거 유바 대 모히트 바. 되는 가서 드니 시바디 콘이 차는 진시 나타다 공작 유스 나타다 사마사 유스랑 아주 하고도도 대팅 온 사마사 임바이야스 사마들 좋아한들 도와스 시바디 대 하고도
So that's Dempa or Den, and so mindfulness is Den Shi. And so Shi, the second part, means to know. So you know what you remember, basically. You remember something, that's why you know it. It's mindfulness. So you know, like for example, now I'm meditating, now I'm eating food. So you know, you're aware of what you're doing. You know, oh, this is how it tastes. This is how the food tastes. You know what's going on.
오케이. 다 담봉 timba 얘기야 이해가나네. 담보 리timba 얘기야 봐스. 저다 timba 당아 timba 얘기 곰자고 돈다 그래. 곰자고 돈다데 아주 셈게 내로도 거는 다 곰자. go majam chung kare tambo chung de ngas ha chung de da nga so nam ju sen na na nam to nyo mo ba mam bo che na ta nam bo kare na le nam bo kare che na yola sen pa de pan thon sen yola pan thon ne do nga kare chi yu me ta nga kare la ko yu go ma chi che do nga kare go yu me yang go ma de de ta nga sam no yola ta pa sen yen so da sen pa yola yen do sen yola yen ne de nga pe che do go lo yu no do da sen yen do 삼성 안 스테이 못다 대라야 세민 삼성 안 내가 사와드 대라야 세민 삼성 말을 기대 대라야 세민 한 너는 파트를 세민이 되니 한 삼지 자당 봉송도 서야 지해요 요리 뛰는데 자당 봉송에 지야 또 진대 맞아 봐 샘도 저 나보 작아요 나 너는 나보 맞아는 방아 있다 나는 되니 샘도 다 거라 뇽 바나나 누구 아니요 뭐바는 로든 쭉 가래. 요데 중이요. 직다다 리셈 강이 해당 되는 차도 양 대단히 저 레와 대 바부터 바 레도 센터 너무 영어다. 다도 강 다도 강 가리 될 때는 레서거다. 해당된 분이 이나 배는 세지야. 차도 되는 이나 세지야. 또 뭐지야. 나도 좀 뭐지 다 레서 하면 되는 제보 동안 써야지 용도가 다 다른 티고 피제 마무리다 제로 파티 레 뭐게 와사발 티네 티네 제보 동안 되는 소송다 당나는 좀 만나지 차이는 말아요 동안 잠을도 때 탐지 생각 때문에 레사 여벌 때는 리산 얘기 때문에 레사 벌 때는 티네 레 티네 제보다 제왕도 다양한 제와 제스마다 저 가지고 있는 제보도 미인 거다 얘는 대답들이 동하나는 누구다 동하나 대거다 दूजित ध्यान दुगोते ना दुजित तम मगे वजगे ते जेवते दोहावाते हुए देसन था गोम जांदे ले लाओ गोम जा तो ना था गोम जांदे तने को मिक्ति जे जोन ने तने तेला ना जो सेंड छ ने चाता सार चाता जो ता को रे सा तेने दांगा ना जो लुले तेने ता गोम जाया लुतन ते गोम जाया 이제 되니 류때는 공자서 나그 류라 때는 그 샘도 열로 맞춰왔지 샘도 열이나 파마도 저랑게 류라 되니 저때는 류가 딱지지 되니 미관로 단 너들은 미관로 정네 되니 되는 그 공자가 열었어
So first is the mindfulness of the body. And so first of all, we should know really what's the whole purpose of meditation practice. The purpose of meditation practice is to realize the nature of the mind. And then we also should know what happens if we do not meditate. Now, what is the problem if you don't meditate? It is that normally the mind, so when we don't meditate, our mind has a lot of thoughts and a lot of afflictive emotions. And the mind is constantly projected outward at looking at various objects in the outer world. And we are rarely aware of what am I actually doing. We're not really aware of what we're doing, of what we are saying, even of what we are knowing. We don't generally have any awareness of what's really going on around us because we are constantly distracted by different things. And so then this is how time just goes by. Life just passes by and we're just constantly distracted, and then time just flies. For example, we see some kind of entertaining things, and then we are totally distracted by that. Or we do some kind of work, some activity, and we are distracted by that. Or we get distracted just talking to someone, and then time just flies by. And then sometimes we also get distracted by or caught up in our thinking, our emotions of attachment, of anger, of ignorance. We don't protect the mind from them. We don't look after the mind, but we just let them roam about the mind freely. We just let them be there, all these negative emotions. And so what's the problem with that? So there's two problems with that. First of all, in the short term, right now, it causes a lot of difficulties for your mind, unpleasant feelings. So when you feel angry or jealous, or you have a lot of hopes or fears and you're worried all the time. So that is really tormenting the mind right now. And also, then the second thing is ultimately, in the long run, it leads to more suffering because with these negative emotions, we accumulate negative karma. For example, we harm others with those emotions, and that can only lead to suffering in the end. So that's also what we talked about last night, how our karma leads to the result of suffering. For example, birth in the three lower realms. And even in the human world, we all experience all kinds of sufferings. So that is because we accumulate karma with body and speech and mind. So, and if you accumulate karma, then we will experience difficulties right now in this life, in the short term, and also in the long term, in future lives. The result of these karmas will ripen. And so this is how we spend our lives just in suffering. Even though all we really want is to be happy, we always end up experiencing suffering. And so that is why we want to meditate. We need to meditate. Meditation is not easy. Um, so because it's not easy, we need some kind of focal point, something that the mind can focus on so that it can stay with some stability and clarity. And so the first kind of mental focus is the mindfulness of the body. So here you focus on the body and the mind stays there without being distracted outward, thinking about anything else, any other object. So you're basically analyzing the body, you're looking at the body. So the body becomes your focal object for the meditation. So
네. dimba yamba ye karje yong sina ambo ngala so tan namdo rapa yo namdo hajang ka rapa namdo shukchim bo yong chati tni tambo le timba nyawa yo tni te namdo de man charen ro tni chowa timba nyawa tni namdo dewe jang ma sembe ta nomo ba namdo charen ro charen de chung ro ta nyong ro de tni sem timba nyawa yo tni tape hajang chawa le tni chu timba nyawa yo tni de ko yurum ro ji tambo 차라고 보니까 던지 진행이 거 기반이 이제 기어도 되는 거 있어요.
So there is those four foundations of mindfulness. And so why is there four? It's actually they actually have to go in that specific order. There's a significance to that order. And that is, it has to do with our kind of the coarseness and or subtleness of our afflictive emotion. So in the beginning, the mind is coarse. We have very strong afflictive emotions, very strong thought patterns. And then on a more coarse level, we practice with the body as a focal object. And then as our afflictions kind of lose in kind of lessen in their intensity, so they become a bit more subtle. Also the focal object becomes more subtle. So then the next level then is feelings. And then as the emotions become even more subtle, so less intense, then we move on to the mindfulness of the mind, which is more subtle than the feelings. And then when the afflictions become very subtle, there's not a lot of coarse afflictions, then we come to the most subtlest of focal objects, and that's the mindfulness of phenomena.
아, 루틴 바니어리 야바여 루틴 바니어리 야바세 담보 난 루틴 담보야 탑토 데 당아 곰자 거다 곰자네 티니 루틴 바니자 지거데 티니 곰자 담보 난난 치드스 나 정도 되는 소보야 카토 데 거다 강바도 지처럼 자 다 강바 간디 야나 치치모면 너 되는 소보야 카토치
So first is the mindfulness of the body. So because this is a meditation, we also assume meditative posture. So ideally, you sit very straight. So ideally, you sit in the 7-point posture of Vajrayana, but at least you have you sit in a straight posture. You can also sit cross-legged, or basically you can have your legs whichever way is comfortable. But most importantly, have a straight back.
다 든데시 곰자니 다 리팅바니와 루스 나랑 빌르라 고나 되거리 야테 마인 바타라 여 죽주 풍부 죽 상만가 야마 초가 산도디나 아 드니 다팅 딩바니와 야드 벤나 나그 루기 착처 저처럼 나기 다다 남주가 안서 봐 생도 열렸다네 가리 뭐 가리치도 뭐 가리랜드 사와 가리 뭐 가서 열렸다 대만이 같이 나랑 하고 열렸다 나 뭔가 가리치도 로왕나 짜다 가리치도 로왕나 맥도 가리치도 아깝지디 가리 것도 이래 근데 막 한거는 찌위존이 막 아무 털 말이거든 신경쓰는 안 한그 르지 줍쳤다 르지 착처 저라 사람도네 되니 사람도 되니 yin ba se di da de o ngon go de ji do as o nga am cho de de ji do as o nga me de do as de ha ko shi be se o nga me o da ha nga me de na ta no ya nga na ka de de ji de da de na sem de ro go da sem de de na le ba pa do to bo de se de se ne de tab je sin ta nga ge zu bo cha cha nga ka kang ba la pa ta nga ge che do go la zu bo de chul nang ge chu 드니 주보 석 저처 아트솔라 상가당하단 너디나 임베 생즈 남주가 아주 임베 마쟁사도 아주 카페 열로 삼아 따는데 제 주보 기다 하고 막하는 깡바 열에 라파 열에 남주 주보 열에 레긴데 열에 코 참아 접촉 참아 기다콘 초바 만다와 열에 남주 열에 거는 대화도 소이 되는 같은 거 주요 말 이빼 이족 친구 나족로 지 잠나 하이 하고 집만으로 지 세는 지 강반으로 지 뜻 쳐들고 힘에 잘라 힘바지 뭐지 유연은 되니 배속 침보지 잠마도 서로만 남주 나는 거 저거요만 그리고 거 지금 소화 그래서 내가 하고 그 값도 중에 준비 증거 맞다 저거만 준비 증거 맞다 나 준비도 열로 힘바로 뭐 근데 많이 믿지 다 준비 얘기 류 준비 얘기해서 나랑 그류 때나 니 샘지 봐야
And so you look at your body as your focal object. And so what you're looking at is, so basically, like the composition of your body, like your anatomy, if you will. So how does that body, what is there in the body? So normally we don't really pay attention to that because we are distracted by other things. We don't really think about, what am I actually doing, and what is all of this? What is it? What's my head, for example? What's inside of my head actually? How does that exist? How does that appear? And what is that composed of? And what about my hair? How did that grow? And what about my eyes? What are my eyes doing? So basically, when we pay attention to the body, we analyze the body from head to toe, and we look at every single part. So this is my legs, and this is my hands, and how is it? What's in there? How does it exist? And that's my eyes and my nose and my ears and so on. So what is all of that? So the mind goes there, and you think about the way it all exists, the way that your hands and legs and so on exist. And so normally, of course, we always have our hands and legs, and we have our fingers. They're always there, but we are not mindful of them. We don't pay any attention. So there is no special sensation, or we don't really contemplate what they really are. We don't feel them, so to speak, even though they are actually there. The only time we feel them is when we are actually in big pain, when some of those parts hurt, when we are wounded, for example, then we feel. For example, you don't really think much about your foot until you put some heavy object on it. Then you think about your foot because then it hurts. And normally you don't think about it. You don't pay no attention to it. So we're not really aware of what's actually really there and what it actually is, how it feels, what's in there. And that's because the mind is constantly somewhere else. It's occupied with other things. And so here we're bringing the mind back to the body, and we are focusing on the body, looking at what this body actually is. So.
That is in a bit, Luton, Seventeen, Timbati, and it, Gombia. A Gombia, the Timbat, and Shipas, Tinshi, sensitive. Nagaya, Pena, Lula, and a Tinshi Gomdo, and something same the yellow Lolo, same the solo young Roatan. Marangi in a day matava. Roa, Timbat and a day matava, Chilian, to Gombia, the Zono, Chilian, same yellow Lolo, attended. Shipas, it, up. 그럼 밑바닥은 샘들 로드에 샘들 샘 리얼로 연로도에 티때는 곰도 따다 야투고도에 데이터 딘시 있어 그 군이 손도 줘야지 이니 티때는 샘 따다 대 유닛 따비치가 되셔
So we meditate by focusing our mind on the body, by taking the body as our focal object for meditation, and then being mindful of that. So having an awareness from remembering what is in the body, and then being fully aware, having knowing that you are there. So meaning that. So when you meditate, you might have some mindfulness on the body. And while you sit there and you meditate, it still may happen that sometimes the mind still gets distracted and it goes somewhere else, goes outside. You can't always stay with your focal object. You get distracted, even though you're sitting there meditating. So at that time, this is where this shipa, this knowing, the second part comes in. You have an awareness, you're conscious of, of what's actually happening. So you know, am I going anywhere in my mind? Am I actually being here? Or what am I actually meditating or not? So that's this conscious aspect of remembering.
다 이제 리팅바니가 곰jan 남도든 삼성 거 좀 맞히도 연거 얘는 진 남도도 연거 요바 진시대 하고 시바대 하고네 다른 나한테 팀바 내리자 내가 봐 센스디 가와가 그 셈데 류팅나 다른 미과 정도로 미과 될 때에요 이때는 야트보다 이때는 데트보다 아 시바대 그 데그도 뭐도 딴 등이 답지치네 근데 지금 되고니 나 진시대더니 송도게 되네 띵하고 진시 되는 띵하고 리팅바니아 야바 데데지네 다 공자가 다데 동다다 진시 리팅바니가 다 공자다 롭장지 던지리 다 되게 동다로지 가리 하고 그러세 나시 진시 텔을 때는 다 동다로지 가리 하고서 당하게 르라 된 공자도 르드네 해거나다 마땅고 제인바 너무 동하지 누트 저대요 봐 이니 하고라 동하 탐지 타고 통도 괜히 우사가 라비지노 지단 리들이 단빈이 하고 공개 힘들어 간디진 하고서는 참전 리들도 주보는 나사요 그 동하더니 이거도 리트 요발 때는 그때 동하도 이거도 리트 나지 나한테 잘로서 너 드나 리드 코랑 그다랑 안 소티 지금은 소리가 단 들어왔잖아 송그리 들어왔잖아 송데 너도 린도 마장베 제심 저 서로 저기 요새다 제 마장베 제인도 마장베 저기 요새 다 대하고로다 리팅만 이거 대하고 그래서 린도 마장베 제리도 그러니까 그러니까 린다 답지 심조선 당원에 딴 린도 코샤차 봐봐 저리도 더 정네 그거는 다 샤차 봐봐서 똑바리다 맞아 오늘 팔로지 인바기 셔데베 심지인 거 롱라고 다 차라고 던tun가 가서 현황제도 이는 아주 누구 하나도 죽차지 빠지잖아. 그 죽다 옆다 가도 만다바리 마도 저 그러지. 샤타를 좀 되면 찍어지잖아. 차대요. 되는 되고 엄마 싸움 되는 거 놓고 나 추초도 나 용도 로람도 겐고 차 추초도 꼴로 본데 요 산타 그 엄마 싸움 돼 인상 같은 거 요다. 참자 두고 내가 또 그도 너든 그 르도 오늘 동하게 놓다 지인데 봐. 맞장 그 제일 좀 돼봐 봐. 르도 다 동하게 놓다 지인 봐. 니 때는 하고 요새를 있다라 루팅 많이 야라. 니 답게시 뭐가 좀벌 답게시 는 거로. 답게시 힘조스를 이긴데 배. 좀벌 그 차셔를 이긴데 싸움 당는 니 답게시. 니 좀도 또 하고 요래서.
Um, so we focus on our body, we are mindful of our body, and so as we are mindful of our body, sometimes the mind becomes distracted, right? So there's always this ongoing stream of thoughts within our mind, and so with mindfulness, with consciousness, you know that they are there. So that's the first part, this denshi, right? Mindfulness. And then this other part, the foundations, or it's literally, I would say, it's application. So it's nyashak. So the whole term for mindfulness and application is Jempa nyashak. So nyashak is the second part, which is to place the mind somewhere. So it's like you apply the mind. So you place the mind together with that focal object, which is here the body. And then with mindfulness, with consciousness, you know that you are there and you analyze it. So this is this application of mindfulness on the body, just in brief. And so the purpose of this mindfulness on the body is so that we recognize what the body actually is. So the body is actually what we should recognize is that the body is like a heap of impure substances. It is a vessel of suffering. It is just like rubbish. So it's something that causes a lot of suffering. So how can we understand that? How can we know that? It's fairly obvious because we're always in pain, we're always sick, we have all these complaints and aches in our bodies. So it's clear that because of the body, we experience a lot of pain and suffering. In the Vinaya teachings, it mentions that the body consists of 36 impure substances. And so that is what we should really recognize when we focus on our body as the focal object. The body consists of flesh, blood, bones, skin, and these are actually all sort of filthy substances. For example, when you see somebody else's, for example, a different dead body, somebody else's corpse, or somebody else's blood, that usually when we see blood or like a dead body, that invokes really scary feelings. It makes us feel really frightened. But actually, we are the same. We also have that flesh and that blood. We look a little bit different, but it's the same material. It's the same substance. And so by looking at the body, we can understand that this is what it actually is. For example, we get old, we age. It's because of this body, and it's this body that ages, this body of impure substances. Or sometimes we get hungry really easily. Why? Because of this body again. So that's why we can conclude that this is a vessel of suffering. So this is what the conclusion we get to by focusing on the body as our mental or focal object. So as you focus on the body, so in the end, this is what you're supposed to recognize.
답변은 안 듣는 효과야. 나랑 지금 내가는 거 해야 돼. 달래가는 거네. 딱그 주본들한테 프로틴 치드더니 사마사야 그 뭐야. 가르치기 대상 강바. 근데 뭐다. 찌유는 니 되는 거 만들고 다 봐. 갑자기 망고 작아도 사마 맞으면 거 두고 또 사마 사와히는 안에 사 망자는 배 양조본 나야. 그리고 조본 투디 맞이면은 거 나야 거요. 그리고 단 더드는 거 중에 조본 때문에 됐지. 영화 탐지는 용고 그거 이 바트니 하고 당하게 답지 있을 텐데 동화 다 동화지라 이다 조본 들을 때는 동화 먹고 지요 거요. 이 하고 답지 먹고 쓰여로 빼는 가서 쇼가야는 투지 장마 조페 조타 조 휴가를 자거든요. 맞다고 자거든. 가시 니마지 눈차지 코즈고 투디 베데 장만로지 마즈 그와 장마 마즈 대바이는 돈이 바 쉬차용도 주는 맞아는 주마 조용도 남시 장사 타는 어제를 남시 조사에는 장사 주마 조용 거야. 너는 그 주본 들 때는 맞서 동하면 뭐 진정 다때 근데지는 다 동화도 좀 연구요 봐. 동화가 용산들 륜들 때는 연구요 봐. 저 하고 될 때는 륜들 때는 동화만 보여 봐. 공지 다 가래 하고는 산지에 따라 딘바 희신 나니 딘바 담보 동화를 히버사세 찌도다 딘래보다 다른 대단하게 느낌 많이 야 곰자네 당나가 수고 찹찹 속에 땅 아, 속에 좀 전에도 저 하고는 땅이 다 동화잖아 이 신이 때문에 산지기 담보는 욕하는 시바 사세 이 동다들래 나티 동다들래 하고는 가래핀 거다 내가 답지 세세신 담아린데 동화지 누리들 하고 hin도 가래 델레티는 항아그 차이 찹바트 힘바 남중아 리틀 때는 열로 빼쳐바치거다 zupochi 당이 갑자기 휴작을 인가 약고 있냐 그러 이 저도는 뭐그 따는 보이냐 그러 뱅아랑 빼지 그래 휴작을 대 탐지를 비니쳐도 그때 착바 총도 그러 신차 총도 착바트 힘바도 좀 총도 해야지 다 착바트 힘바도 좀 맞총을 나 이거 내당 엄마한테 신세대 거 차진다랑 이거 막 총도 좋아했어 근데 잘라지는 잘라든 가게 담보 빼 이거 짜친 버리면서 오늘 지 김죽스의 잘라든 오늘 이쪽 민족이 이거 하고는 그래 것이 내가 담보 잘라 짜친 버리 삼세는 좀비인데 내가 하는 거 나가 생각되는데 망아질 거 이쪽 민족이 이거 하고 살아 그 대답되는 륜도 bed는 하게랑 이 하고 들리는 동안에 이 하고 근데 들리는 류들리는 열로 잡고 힘받게 참아 듣는 마 좋은 거 있어요. 다 이때는 근데 다 가능하게 찍었어요. 렌들 때는 당에 이 캡상이네요, 다. 그냥 성격이 캡상 가능해요. 무슨 렌들 때는 내 당연히 저는 렌들 때는 내 동안 말이 있지. 신차 말이 있지. 신바도 차부지서 말하지. 렌들 때는 당에 르가 있음 주고는 이해가 되듯이 사와. 게벌 수남질에 싸고 상기와 두고서. 그리고 당한 판중에 른더게 치드 른더 치드 나그 르드 나 요코스미로 나 요코스미 먹게 먹고서 될 때는 나고 다른 른더를 동하여도 우리 선언을 코 방송으로 당에 코 파유 그것은 요보 쾅에 파유 그 다른 요보 그것은 당에 코랑게 배 힘받아 쳐부지 생각한다는 거 네 삼바드 제가 되는 리드 비주 땅에 힘을 핀 사와도 수남사기 힘핀 사와도 위인사 다 들리게 되는 데 리게 되는 내당 힘 되니까 리게 되는 개발적이야 수남사에 그래서 다 지고에서 레이서
For example, you get up in the morning and get ready for work. You eat breakfast, eat something, drink something, get dressed, and go in your car and go to work from your house. And so you have all these things, and all of that is actually for the body. You eat, you drink, you have a car, you have a house, and you get all dressed up, or the body. And maybe even one car is not enough, maybe you need two. Or sometimes then you don't eat enough, you get hungry, or you eat too much and you get sick of it. And so it's all because of the body. So we can really see that it's because of the body that we constantly suffer, that we get sick, that we are in pain. It's the source of all of our suffering. It's because this is all about our body. So when you analyze that, this is what you come to understand. This is what you come to realize. If you just think about it, when you get up in the morning, how much effort do people make just to get ready in the morning, how to look pretty, to look presentable? We make this effort to look nice each and every day. We do that. Imagine you wouldn't do that for an entire week. You don't take a shower, you don't kind of dress, or you don't make like get ready, kind of all cleaned up. In after 1 week, you would look probably really horrible, and you wouldn't want to go out because you care so much about what other people think. If you don't wash, for example, for a week, you're probably quite smelly. Maybe now not so bad because it's a bit colder, but when it's warm, you start smelling instantly if you don't wash because of the body. So it creates all of these problems. So when we think about it, we can really understand all the suffering that we endure just for this body. And so when the Buddha first taught the Four Noble Truths, the first one is you have to recognize suffering. And this is what he meant by that. This is what we need to recognize. We need to first recognize the suffering body, the real nature of what that body actually is. And so then what's the benefit of that? So now we have reflected on that. We know this body is a vessel of suffering. It's filthy. So what's the point of that, of knowing that? Point is that when you know that, then your emotions, your attachment to this body will get lesser. For example, if you have normally when you because you are normally attached to outer phenomena, outer things, to your body, you care so much. You go through any kind of hardship, whatever it takes, to look good, for example, because you want to look nice for others, because you care what they think of your body, of how you look. And if you understand what the body really is, then you will care much less about that. There will be much less attachment to this physical body because you know what it actually is. Just like if you have an object, some kind of thing that you really like very much, you love that thing, and then finally you realize that it's actually quite useless and you don't really need it for anything, then you're not no longer attached to it. You're no longer holding on to it. You just let it go very easily. And so this is what happens when you understand what the body really is. There will be much less attachment. Um, so this is kind of like it's like you gain an advantage from knowing that. It's like a good business deal that you make. The advantage that you gain, the profit, sort of, so to speak, that you gain is that you no longer become attached to your body. And so the advantage then is that you think, so up until this point, I have been the slave to my body. Now I'm going to turn things around. I'm going to make that body my slave. I'm going to use that body for good things, to practice virtue. Up until this point, I've done so many negative things just for this body. And all of these non-virtuous actions will throw me into the lower realms. Now I will turn it around and I will start using that body. I will not allow it to use me. I will use it to practice love and compassion, to help others. So you turn it around, and when you recognize that, you turn it around and you start to make use of this body to create merit, or to practice the Dharma.
아양 그 밀리르 친데더니 비주 땅네더니 산지지 공팡 토벌 시고 산네더니 에 냠닌치고여스 리팅 반야야.
So in the mindfulness of the body, we then basically think that I'm going to use this precious human body in order to attain enlightenment.
다 이바된 소화된 반야 말이야 봐스.
Yeah, the next second is the mindfulness of feelings.
호와스는 하고 그랬어. 호와도 기타 류단 초안이 그냥 자월이 따라 류팀반이야 야한테 가서 류들 답이 힘조생인데 누군 내 당도 답이 지금 초와도 내가 쉬는 거야. 그리고 단 초와 팀반이야 야바생 자리 않고 초와도 정말 류되는 거예요. 류도 생각되는 거도. 얘도 휴위지空把내가 빼인 거예요. 그래서
So do you know what feelings are? Actually, body and feelings are quite similar, aren't they? Because when we analyze the body, all we really find is different feelings, different sensations in the body. And so now, then, however, it gets more subtle and we place our mindfulness on those feelings. But actually, so the body and the feelings, they're quite similar. So there's a really connection between them.
일단 초와는 초왔으면 거다. 초와 대화 초와 대화 센스비 배낭아랑 배루루 리치 배낭 장통산로 진로 장통 루루 지금 초와 기본 조보 조마찰 분 이제 루루 지금 초와 기본도 된 초와 대화 아 때는 뒤에 내 나산로 지 육지는 민간으로 민간 나사도 야보다 배트니 저 나무도 민지인데 기본스 데트니스 된 초와 기본이거든 나는 사원을 나오는 배지 그래서 야 뭔가 고야 야 보통 좋아 기본 있는 거 신발 기본도 나오도 좋아 기본도 좋아 기본 그러면 좋아 도 나왔어 좋아 도 나왔어 저기 오 당가 사원을 나오는 마찬가지 양지 뭐 조пол은 나찬도 좋아한다 단 도드는 마디어 가래 마디어 정선 좀 좋아 마디어 여러 때 좋아 도 나와요 어떤 나왔어 음 근데 단형 세대 값 대디 야는 대변 좋아 야는 동하는 좋아 그냥 되니 강연 많이 봐 되니 그 빠르 때는 말아 되니 그건 좋아 다 지루루는 지 대화 많이 동하 많이 좋아 단형을 지 점점 연구열다 되는 좋아 단형시 근데 대 대선은 아주 단 좋아라 다 대선 가능적인 거예요 나도 남주 중도 좋아 대선 가능적인 남 되거다 대선 가능한 다 다른 초과 팀반 얘기야 공개하는데 다 남주 다른 공들 리니 집어 담보 가서 남주 가서 열라 파 이해는 따는들 맞아 나는 초학생 한 딱히 시간 맞다 난 초학한다 그러 같이 싫어하지 다 다른 초과 팀반 얘기하세요 초과 대왕도 해 초과 대왕이나 뒤때는 나도 본자 양은 초과 동안도나 뒤때나 양 공자 팀반 얘기하고 좋았다 형도 다 좋았다 형이도 사 영어하고 좋았다 형도 좋았다 형들이도 사지 하고 니티나 공자 어떤 더 좋아 대화다 늘인다 스트릭트 진티는 나 공자다 이것은 근데 되게래서 난 좋아코라 답지신 되고 다 공자신 좋아진 봐 나도 남주 공자신다 남주 쭉쭉 대대 좀더 대대 공자는 그 땅을 내가 개요 말이나 내가 가려서 단 초와 팀반 얘기하는 난 초와 가려줘도 단 다티 때문에 그냥 공자인데 다티 초와 팀반 얘기하지 다 뭐지 때나테 레삼도 가지고 얘는 나도 무슨 공자냐는 신데 레삼 근데요 말이 얘는 거 레삼 먼저도 요기가 많이 봐다 초와 팀반 얘기하고 저 돈다도 근데 인사를 하고서 김기되는 배설시는 공자 미치고야 해서 되는 매조는 다 검장 용한테 매조시 담무 매조시 되네 요마 매조 마고 되네 되네 배랑 강화 슈슈도 되네 배 대답 되는 거 검장 투고 여러 왔어
So for feelings, there are three different kinds of feelings that we can have. The first one is feeling happy, feeling good. And so that's, for example, when you're quiet and you're relaxed, like you have drinking some tea or you're having a good conversation with a friend, you feel good. So that's a feeling of well-being. And then, or for example, when you were sick, you were in hospital and then you're better and you come back home to be with your family, you feel happy, you feel good. Or when some activity turns out successful, you're happy. So that's the feeling of well-being, the first one. Second one is the feeling of suffering. That is when things don't work out well, or when you are sick or have any other problem, anything that doesn't work out, that makes you feel bad. And then there is the feeling of like a kind of equanimity or indifference, where it's basically a state where it's kind of neutral state where you do not feel particularly happy or sad. You're just kind of relaxed and you don't have any special feeling. That also happens sometimes. So at any given time, you are in one of those three kinds of states of different kinds of feelings, how you feel. And that is what you're mindful of here when you're applying your mindfulness on feeling. So it's quite similar than being mindful of the body. Again, normally we are distracted by other things outwardly. We don't really look at our feelings. And so here now we look at our feelings. How are you feeling? You're feeling happy, then meditate on that, stay with that. You're feeling sad, then meditate with that, stay with that. Or you don't feel anything in particular, you can also be mindful of that. You know that I'm just not feeling anything in particular, just feeling kind of equal. Then you meditate on that. So that's the meditation on feelings, where you take feelings as your focal object. And so again, normally when we meditate, we sit in a straight posture, and when we look at the mind, and it may seem that there is not really much to do, but the only thing you need to do is just here, you look at your feelings, you place your mind at your feelings. And to some, it may seem even a bit too simple, but it's not that easy to actually, when you really meditate on it. Even though it's a simple meditation, it's also not so easy. And still, even though it's not so easy, you have to persevere and not give up on it. Yeah. So initially, you have to make an effort. You have to make an effort in staying with your feelings. And in the end, the more effort you make, the more effortless the meditation will naturally become.
어떤지는 그냥 앞에 배절시 다 공자 주는 걸자 되는 데들이 통통의 자티나 된지다 공자 된지 스탄 소와라 답지 시원 단 소와 답지 시단 소와 데도 다녀도 좀 답지 심조시 그네 되잖아 공자 다 된지 스탄데 또 아래 하콘을 위해서는 소와 대화이나 동화이나 대화도 동화 가이나 소와 진짜 대화이나 동화 차다 소하고 대화지나 가르친 전로래. 소와 대화지 대가 맞다봐. 배나 배지잖아요. 배는가 가시게 두고지 차라 두고지 대게잖아요. 기보여요. 니마지 두고는 가 차서는 진심바지 띵 두고는 가 차서는 가장 기보든 참고든 성. 동화 저린 도로. 그 소와 대화든 그 동화를 얘기 동화 동화는 주고 배나 그거 참 공지도 대토예요, 맞았어. 니마지 children yana kwan children kwan yana ngaran chibu mato pe yoren bolo japha ton sa se tu ya ma antar ko kha tra tra no kha tra ni den de nga nang yin cha de pe ne zupo de ga na nga zupo de ta kan de yo ni chi bo yo ro ya zupo na cha no chi wa yana ya ko de kha de ta cha ma pe na ran pe jin bo yo de cha ba nga ma de nga de wo yu zupo ya ko yu se ya sang de ro te na yo na cha cha chi yo na pe 처음에 대상 가려이나야 그 동안 주스였다. 또 당한서 로충충의 시위는 아니 맞지 gen거차. 처음에 양 로충충의 소화지 보지요. 그때 한번 그냥 차. 대인데 그 소화 순간 대화다 동화와다 단용 대승과 그 동화의 저차들이 그래서 동화지 아니래서 그래서 되는 하고 되는 좋아대 탐지한테 숨카한테 가만히 좀 벌써 그런 숨카 당번이 가만히 좀 당번이 그 먹이 없거나 되는 누구였다 뭐 내가 동안 걸 그래서는 말이 받아 또 먹다 무슨 때는 되는 때 좋아지는 거예요 여러분 너무 차다 대충 건데 좋아 나도 당 가려는 거예요 걔인데 그 싸워는 거지 콩라고 돼 먹이 왔다 단지 말이 받아 중앙인자 그 기저든 동안 이차가 요랬어 대는 안서 산지가 손데 dimba 이해가는 따라 공중 빵나 사세지와 담보도 많이 봤어 동안 이제 공중 먹게 왔던 게 빵나 사세 공중 녹차대 가르치는 거 말이 봤다 왔는데
Mm, And so, when we meditate on our feelings, so you're then looking at whatever state you're in, whether you feel good or you feel bad or you feel indifferent, a neutral state. So that is what we focus on when we place our mindfulness on feelings, how we are feeling. And then at the end, so what is the end result? What's the point of meditating on our feelings? So it is to recognize that every feeling, any of those feelings, even the feeling of happiness, when you feel really good, actually is suffering. So that's what we should get at. For example, if you think about it, you may have a very dear friend, your best friend, and you're together, and you're happy, you love each other. And then one day something happens and you separate. So all that happiness you had yesterday now is all gone. It has become the cause of suffering today now. So all of that happiness has all along been the cause of suffering, actually. And even if you don't separate and you stay together, one day one is going to die. Either it's going to be you or your partner first, but somebody's going to die first. We are not going to live for thousands of years. One day we are going to die. So all of this is just the cause of suffering naturally. Or when you think about first you're healthy, you're feeling really good in your body, and then you get sick, and you just remember of these days when you had a good body, when you were healthy. So first I had such a good body, and now you can just remember that. Just like aging. First we are young, one day we get old. And then all we can do is remember of how nice those days were when we were young and had this young, healthy body. Now is this all gone? It's just a memory. So all of these feelings, the three kinds of feelings, are really the cause of suffering ultimately. And that is what we have to understand through this practice. So therefore, since it is all suffering, so then where do these three kinds of feelings come from? What is the source of these three kinds of feelings? It is all non-virtue. They come from ignorance, they come from delusion, from attachment, and so on. And these afflictions lead to these kind of feelings. And at the root of these feelings is self-grasping and ignorance. And therefore, it can only be the cause of suffering, whatever the feeling is. So, of the four truths taught by the Buddha, so we said the first one was to recognize suffering. That was the previous one. And now this one, the mindfulness on feelings, is related to the second of the truths, which is abandon the origin of suffering. So by looking at our feelings, we come back to the origin of our suffering, the origin of these feelings, which basically is ignorance.
당가서 소화 팀바 녀를 야바스야 되게 가래 거서 당한 소화 팀바 녀야라 이제 지금 검자가로 남지들의 검자 소화 때나 되는 생기 소화 때는 되는 나보다 간지직 생배 소화 때 간지직 지hen도 간지직이도 되는 되는 야부 하고요 야부 하고 Today since the 남중가 가르쳐서 남중가 초비지신 당거다. 소화기 지신다. 소화가 왕들죠. 그리고 소화 동화 마용어치 등 배설시. 소화 대화용어치 등 배설시. 단 도되는 소화기 나서 왕들죠 거다. 왕들죠는 나도 진짜 거는 비주 당거다. 그리고 다 다른 안에서 단 소화 팀만 얘기하고 범죄하는데 다른 안에서 반 소화 왕들죠. 초보 왕들 말하지. 소화기 지신 말하지. 초월은 밑밤이 가서 보다. 너들은 다른 근데 초월팀은 얘기가 센스. 이런 초월 권한 가르치기도 직받는데. 얘네 초월 권한 밑밤이 같이 하는다. 초월 짓은 다 그래요. 대하고 그래서
So when you meditate on the mindfulness, you're mindful of your feelings. So then you recognize whatever feeling it is that arises, and however you feel, you recognize that. And so normally, so in our ordinary state, we are controlled by those feelings. So we follow those feelings. They lead us around. They control us. And that is why we experience a lot of suffering because of our feelings. Because we always try to avoid negative feelings, and we try to find positive feelings. So this is how our feelings control us. So when you practice this mindfulness on feelings, and you are turning that around, and you start to control your feelings, and you do no longer let them control you. So by looking at your feelings, like what am I actually feeling, by being mindful of your feelings, you take away their power to control you, and you then become in control, and you no longer follow those feelings.
아주 까만 좀 15 minutes break okay. 맞아 저한테 식으로 저한테 다 건드네. 센트 반여기가 단 소화팀 반여기가 되네 지란서 양티 콜 좋아요는 되네 저한테는 되게 더스.
So now we come to questions and answers. So ask any questions about what we just talked about those applications of mindfulness, about feelings or the body.
Have a question?
If you're not completely suffering, then you're not feeling completely happy.
I don't really hear anything.
So you were talking about bliss and you were talking about suffering, and there's something in the middle. Is that a form of ignorance?
So what was the first part?
So Rinpoche was talking about Dewa, happiness, and then he was also talking about feeling suffering. Feelings, when it comes to feelings. So when you're not feeling either extreme, is that a form of ignorance?
다 대화 마인 받으니 또 나게 잡아 마이나 되니 아직 티 믹스에다 가양다 뭐 직 잡아 매나 되니 티 모르베 나리바.
이게 싸워 또 생기요래라 그래서 그 텔레 시바서 보여 말이야. 시바서 보면 진시 텔 진시요 말이야. 진시미네 거사 보면 텔 거. 가서 나 홈통도 이러 나도 빼는 가서 띵 컴바나 되는 게 가서 소화 가면 좋는 거지. 그리고 이 마음은 이 코드에 zon도 센트지 봐. 지난 루루 인데 봐 간시라 네 지금 소화 대화 사고 미가 동화서 본 발루루로 지금 가서 남주세는 루루로 지 레데는 그거 이네 때라 만서 공근은 히 데베는 리퍼사차 돼요 말이 텔레 진시 돼요 말이 이 진시들 리퍼사차 가야 미스 때그 뜨모리 때 뜨모 가서 레로 뇽렌도 지 차들 때 자와들 때 뜨모가 생겨서 근데 무게가 공부도 요래서
And so yes, it that would be ignorance. because at that time when you feel this kind of indifference, you are not a very clear. So the mind is not very clear. That you're not really mindful, conscious of the state. It's more like an kind of a blank, dull state. For example, you are together with people in a building, but you don't really, maybe you're almost falling asleep and you don't really feel much. We often just call that being very, just being relaxed. I'm kind of being, like really relaxed, not really feel anything, no happiness, no suffering. But then there is no mindfulness of that. There's no mental clarity here. And that is why this is called it's kind of an idle state. It's like an ignorant state of, it's also called laziness, kind of a neutral state of idleness, an idle state of ignorance. And because of that, it is also a non-virtuous state of mind.
This okay. Russia, you have question? No. Okay, good.
Often feel the talk of suffering in Buddhism and Vajrayana in particular. I often think that people who are not or are early just coming into it sometimes misunderstand because they say, well, I'm not suffering. I'm fine. Oh, sure, I have a few pains, or yeah, my daughter is angry at me, but I'm not suffering. So how do we how do you explain that to them, that suffering is sometimes not knowing you're suffering?
Jadi conti chama tu nagi yuen bahako ina yang chamcham le thambo ban samni sabara na koranso ti kola khayang konyo meba na tinda bo khosona tini ti karina sangeto khayin sena penanga kanga chimise mes samgedo tinga donard mise chimes ti ta changa chungo chi yongo dos penangarangi anyok ting pugo dingala control langsam matau chi mixer da chinga petupori da choba mindos mga jigitos samgedo teni tin nan ti kitebo in sambatel tin nan la yang donar dok serdi Fransula deshi khanas gyagore
Tinana dohan dozin de ke jagona kale khabore. Ozo hakko lelayo maris. Ko unsum korang wala unsum korang wala kapti dewari dero. Korang dewari de dumari dogona. Ozo de kenin kable khabore. Yena taranga namba kete kandiji taha yoresena jonru goreste. In jonru gore te tarachira nekap dewan chimpena chirang uchala chirang chipo de semba chipo yorete. Yena ten jonru du josuna yamana lower change chona pugu chonganta yamana chirangi nachanro chonganta ya kangi yimba de lower chonga ina e kotin dung ta dewo de yomare dongari de ta ta pugu de pe yopal de ne dewan timbuji yorite ta ta pugu de chong songar de ne ko dongari sa de kachang di kasi chini mina di tre dongate yo kachang dewa te yo marla tre dongate yo mare ta de nambe de 호텔 또 대화 간절히 요나야 값도 등하고 손상상 리마도 되고 전로 요차 대동하고 주차도 요레스 동하고 주다 진다도 주차도 요레스 가르스는 한번에 지나서 좀 좀해야 되가 좀 뉴제스 뉴네츠 좀요는 뉴제스 않고 뉴제 인산이고 마타바 인바 마타바 인자 코 동하지라 인바 단번에 코트 접대요 찾아가 접대요 레스 한번 대답은 좀요야 돼갖고 레지 그때는 요 농고 레지한지 아 기회를 팀부 유시들이 얘네 먹게 레지 쇼크해요 레스 된 레버트 그 따고 맞된 정도 그래서 대 인자 레스 Chirang
so
da dewa yeba dewa chi yo te dongha ri la ho ma. Te la te ne dongha ki je chan ro re la ba ta.
so it is difficult to explain that to someone in the beginning. It's not easy to understand. If somebody feels good and then you tell them actually that's suffering, it's difficult for them to accept that, to believe that. And so then how does Buddhism explain that? So Buddhism says that it's the cause of suffering because it will change. For example, if you have a child, you're with your child, you're very happy with your child, one day that changes. That could, for example, things happen. Suddenly the child may die, or you get sick, or some other problem happens. It won't always stay that. So now you're happy with your child, but it won't always be that. It will change one day. And so then when it changes to suffering, that suffering is because of the happiness that you first had. In other words, if you never had that child, for example, you also wouldn't experience that kind of suffering of separation now. But it's because you've had that, and now you don't, that you suffer. And so this is what happens with any kind of happy feelings, because we have it. If we don't have it, then we suffer. So it's really the cause of suffering. So that feeling of happiness. And that is because it is kind of a coming together of many different conditions. And so everything that's compounded, that is coming together, is impermanent. It's bound to fall apart. Therefore, it's bound to end in suffering. But that's what it is, essentially. It's things coming together. It's coming together due to karma. And it is a mix of maybe some slight virtuous karma, but for the most part, non-virtuous karma. So it always leads to more suffering. So when somebody experiences happy, somebody feels happy, they feel fine, we're not saying that you actually suffer, you're not fine. This is not what we're saying. We're saying that this happiness is the cause of suffering. Not the happiness is not suffering, but the happiness is the cause of suffering.
And they respond, that's a very depressing religion you have.
Tini keranzo tini lapire tini keranzo chulok di basic that do not gangya na oshigida.
Zhe, te jacha jare. Te ha ma osu yo. Te ta tonda teng sabu pe yore. I namba kwan tatsa te teng sabu pe yore. Namba tatsa teng sabu kare yore se na. Namba kare she yore se na. Chirang ke tambo ne te mahi zang. Te chirang te dunga te chong yore la kota. Tambo chirang te mahi ne pe hiwi chakwa che yore wa. Ta chakwa che ne te ko yin gyo ne tene chirang dunga chong. Dunga zo ma habi che. Tene pe ranghe jani te so yungu yore wa. Pe kakhe te nyungba chan we. Te so yungu, ngosum yungu yore wa. Are che ne. So jimtsi te mahi zang. Tambo nga na te neka ku dewa te hiwi dewa te zingpa chimbo se. Te dimpa zong. Tene dimpa zong wa tene ngos tene nima chi kange chen chen de. Tene jorwa chi tem de. Tene zo ma habi che ne tendre. Te dunga te chungu yore se. Ta nangba ka tambo ne chirang. 담보리 지난 다 잡잡시 거다시. 다 침보지 요런 다 하더니 지난 만로 알아보다. 다 하더니 만로 안 탈송이 지난 탄 희는 거리다스. 그러와. 된 탄희는 지난 추거리다. 근데 이게 봐나 이게 되네. 데고 잡잡시 하는 거지. 섭섭되게 요래. 되는 되는 지난 담보니 착과치 뭐 맞지. 아. 그러와. 그 참만 따봐 인지 되지. 밸런스는 놓고 버리지. 근데 이게 대해 생각문에 하거나 동다 하고서나 주로 코랑 따뜻 차탄데 가르치기도 뭔가 갈등 법도 쉽차 답지 힘조세나 드는 거네 주로 단 남부 주로 되라 드니 때스 셈로 대화 되지 다사지 하고는 거래서 다 하마온 다 지난 희바나 이리 두제 탐지 마타 버리다스 코와 동하지랑 이리다스 아코치 니마진 추리다스 다도 자는 희인 걸 와대지 뭐 이반진 난꾸야다 마디베 줘야지 오늘 연거요 한번 땡사보 고아망은 땡사보 고아는 거요나 지난 줄로박 희에나 마힌데 땡문에 용거요로 용거 줄로박 때 해발 때인데 줄로박 때 돈인지 지난 든지 용거 때 용거 가로 지난 든지 지거리다 배나 지난 배 차바침보 맞지 차바침보세나 지난 동아 용거리다 차바침보 맞지 라야 때고 탑란 응
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is exactly that. It is actually depressing, but there's big meaning in that kind of depressing teaching, and that is the view, the Buddhist view, which seems depressing to someone, is actually quite profound. So, when we say these things, though. For example, if you feel really happy and you're attached to something, by telling them that this is suffering, we are basically telling them that be careful, don't do that, because if you do that, it will only end in suffering. And it's whether it's Buddhism or not, it always happens. People get so attached to something, they suffer when they have to let it go. And often to the point where they commit suicide because they can't take the pain. It drives them totally crazy. And that's because they don't understand it. They don't understand the real, what it really is. It's because they believe everything to be solid and true. They had this thing and they were so attached and loved it so much. And then one day they lose it and they can't bear that suffering. So often they commit suicide. So by telling them when they're happy that actually that's the cause of suffering, we're telling them really to be careful, just be careful. Because by being attached to that thing is like you're going to an abyss, to like a cliff. And so you're telling them that just be careful, don't go there because you will fall down. And when you fall down, you die. And then so that's why you better not go there. So it's giving them sort of like a warning, telling them to be careful. Do not don't get too attached because everything is impermanent. And it is not just like a Buddhist thing, but this is how things happens to everyone. Everything is actually impermanent. But then if you understand the Buddhist view, then that helps our mind. But because through understanding, you can actually find some inner peace with all of that. If you don't understand that, and you just tell them, oh, everything is impermanent, everything is suffering by nature, you're going to die one day, we are going to die. If you tell them that, if you just say that, then of course it sounds quite depressing, but actually you're really telling the other person, just be careful, because these things actually happen to everyone, not just Dharma practitioners, they happen to everyone. Just in the Dharma, we speak about it and we say that, so this is going to happen, and when it happens, this is what you should do. Or don't be attached, because if you're attached, then this is what is going to happen, you will suffer.
네, 참참 다 든지 렌데 땅 다마다 바트서 시에디들이 뭐 하시게 소화동하지 눈이 두고요 맞다. 예, 눈이 마두어지더니 에 가르치 눈이 두고요 말세다. 될 짐신 떠서 제요래. 짐신데 하kon스데 띵가 그 생고 주 두고요 맞다데. 생고 주 맞다 다때 닝거 맞다. 아유요다. 얘네 알아 이제 가르치는 가이하고 생각합니다. 나 다음부터 이제 직다.
So sometimes when you tell somebody about karma and about impermanence and that everything is suffering, or is feelings of suffering, they don't want to listen to that. They don't want to hear that. And the reason why they don't want to hear it is because they actually, in a way, they know it's true, but they want to avoid that thought because it's too overwhelming. They know it's true, but it's too overwhelming, and they don't want to deal with that thought. So they try to let it go, to avoid it.
나는 삼선지 파들 마들 뒤속에 부를 따라 롭서 트게요. 부 롭서 트는 부 크게 있는 거를 크게 있는 거 말이. 베텐다고 치. 나온다고 베텐다고. 가르치는데 가르치 인포메이션 빼나가 주볼지 만으지 요나로 만으지 중리지 요나 디드는 저거 좋아하는 차을 나 요로 주조는 나 영원 인상 주 주기요마다 주주고마 주예요 말. 다라띵아 지금 코아드 동하지랑 이리 마타파리라도 tek ngune chado gola ho yong sem pogo da ma tum zu zu bana shi tel si zu ma ba chi ni nyuni ma ro tin cha ga yi na ya ta te kha he gi de nyuni tu ga ya na so nang ba se nang ba chulo ngune chulo nyam ni si go ho byon sa te so ngune ta chi this new 다 데리고 봐 좀씩 가래도 가래지는 데 해도 다 그러면은 거와 동하나 이리스 동하 간데지는 동하리 because 데 마타바 인사 동하리도 하시 다 드니 가래지거든 가래지 다한테 드니 다 텔 타탑진도 해서 텔 타탑진은 도 사야지 다 주념에서 타탑진도 해서 드니 나는 지네 다 디드네 한 좀제 동거를 빼는 거 말아래 봐 코랑 기타 मत पोछे di kon mata cha chob je se mamang bo se yero kon ta jan mamang bo se tra dik pa chim bo se ba dik pa chim bo se ta kon ngone ju ba chi ju ba ta ko kal din ju ba chen ong ne dik pa ta mo sa ta nga je jang ni song song chen ri nga du nga sa ni ma cha ba nga nyung ri sam ta nga ta du nga hyu nyung ri nga ni song song che ko len de ha ko ro ni a kare go tan ni a gom ja da sa ni gom ja chu nyam ni chi gom ja ne tan ta ma ni kon 거랑이 뺀 냠닝 침벌에 다 공문에 고동할 세상이 있어 고동할 니 선수가 탈성스 난 선수 있으면지 또 밤이스 난 초월을 당난 초월은 지금 있다 난 추운지 빨 타듯이 거지 성스다 같이지 때 거랑문에 내lok도 언사디 드니 고 샘지 내lok드는 체험이 하고 있습니다 남주 같은 책을 이상 희비 해가 여러 데코다 추운지 빨 조성스 가르친 조를 코네로 도서레스 데이터부터는 나주 과학 때문에 내가로 되는 아주 럽종 세와이나 이 탑람 유데다 동하 유르라데 동하들 탑 탈란지 유데 다 주로 개 말아와이나 동하데 유르데 탑란데 유 말이 탑란데 미자 근데 좀 말아보지 근데 강는 근데 좀번 내고 했던 거 요래서
And so, for example, when parents have a child, sometimes a child listens, and sometimes a child does not listen. And so why what is it like when a child doesn't listen? So for example, if you have a wound, a sore, a spot, and you put your finger there, then it will hurt really more. So you don't want to put your finger there because it will hurt you much more. So this is similar to someone who just doesn't want to think about these things. They don't want to put their finger on that sore spot that's actually there. They just don't want to deal with it. So if you tell somebody that samsara or this life is just suffering, it's all impermanent, it affects them. It hits them inside, and which is similar to putting a finger on a wound, and that they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to hear it. There are some people who do want to hear that. As somebody who wants to practice Buddhism, they want to understand why things are the way they are, and why there is so much suffering and samsara. It's because of impermanence. And then, so since this is how things are, what can we do about it? And then they find that there is actually a way out. There's a way to become liberated if you practice. For example, Milarepa, he was first a very sinful person. He killed many people with sorcery, with black magic. But eventually he regretted that, and he realized that I have committed so much sin, I surely will take birth in the 3 lower realms. And so out of fear, really, he, and understanding karma, he practiced meditation. And in the end, he said that I have become free from the fear of birth in the lower realms, now I no longer fear death. It's because he realized the nature of mind and realized deathlessness, that mind actually doesn't die. And of course, now, normally we always speak about death, we're going to die, but through practicing meditation and realizing the nature of the mind, one actually becomes free from that fear of death. So even though there is suffering, there's also a way out, a method. And for someone who doesn't have the Dharma, there still is suffering. It's just they have no way out. They have no method. And so that is why we see that, and we start to practice and we start to meditate.
Okay. You took to that way, can walk or no? Toward the way, question have? No. Okay. Good. Tang answer the somebody sent him by near Yapa. Nitikola Mashwins. Same team by near Yapa, Chibachitan as a Tarakonda, Hebana, Yitaranga, the same with anything, Karichik, same with our Karichik. Tandako, same with the Haka, same Lane. Then it up in same the Kongas, same the Judang as a Napi Tsor, love the Napi Tsor, or something make pallet and Yula Tanian for Sawat. Something I'm choking noon as Sawat. Something that don't know what the Napi Tsor, you're get the same than Donner. Donner Sawat, but that's all. Then Karachi data same the Kawan Road, Karachi. Intelligence tapis in it, Titina, same Titina, the knitting by gas in the Gonja, or same Namdoji and a Ketaka Yomani, or Namdoji and TGs and down at the Sawa do you want to catch it? Anaka, and the Gonja,
And we continue with the mindfulness of the mind, and it's similar than before. So now we are looking at the mind. What's the mind actually doing? So there are six, we call it six consciousnesses, so six kind of sense perceptions. For example, we see something with our eyes, and that leads us to do something. Or we hear something, and that leads us to do something. So because we perceive different things, we do different things. So the mind follows what we perceive and then makes us do things. And so that is something to be mindful, aware of. Like, where does the mind then lead? Where does it bring us? Where do we go? And what am I then actually doing? What does it make me do? And so on. So without following these thoughts, we don't follow the mind and see where does this end up to. So when a thought arises and then we follow it, what do we end up doing then? So we are being mindful of where the mind leads us to.
아까 샘도 비슈 나다 봐봐 샘도 거슈 상놈만 땅거다 상놈만 보다 인저거다 알아서는 직당 양이 바지 땅 상놈만 아는 그 망고 인저거다 샘 나노 이때 그 남겨 같은 동거마다 나샘 요 나샘 같이 상반 땅도 같이 샘도 인저 같아도 요샘 남도 님바 가는가 그 사바 같이 지는 것도 아주 남겨 통로만 다도 단샘 김반 얘기하면 다 되대 참아 하고 통로 했으나 대하 마운트 마운트잖아 대시 그냥데 대시나 대요 말이지 대때는 따대하 거는 가르치도 다들 답변을 드리는 거서 뭐 임바 가지지 그때 뭐지 가지지 기대시 다 가지지 양으로 마디는 아주 완전 그 다들 통로요 가지니 마땡아 맥좀 되는 게 통로요 말이야 저는 그저 양으로 있는 통로 말이야 니 다들나 같이라는 거였지도 같이라서 게임 하자도 너도 내가 좀 통로도 때디나 이래 다 진시 미나 코믹 좀 봐나 이래 요래 남주 셈남도 지혜일 때 가연 통로 간다 딩히 인터데 다 남도 가지 다. maybe 다 가지. maybe you're zo. 나tam 티티는 가려나. 좀 지바지 아니 차바zo. 만지비지 오는 당. 다hin 바지 주네. 아니 나와 다hin 바지 주네. 차바. 많이 바지 주네. 당. 따라. 제냐 때 많이 버셈나는 거. 남본 차찬자. 뭐 망보지 해야 돼. 차. 생코라 그나. 자 생코라 주니. 차데. 대야 같은 통로를 해서
And so you're looking at your mind, and that mind is impermanent, meaning that you constantly have all kinds of thoughts, and it always changes. So the thoughts are also impermanent. So you think about one thing, and the next moment you're already thinking about something else. But normally we are not aware of that. But actually, there's all these thoughts in our mind. There's all these changes in our mind that we never really notice. And we don't really notice how our past thoughts are gone and what kind of new thoughts we have. So when we are mindful of the mind, that this is what we pay attention to. And so if you're unmindful of the mind, you have no awareness of what's really happening within yourself. So, for example, when you have your eyes open, you're sitting in this room, you have your eyes open, you see what's happening in the room. Some people, maybe somebody's playing, some kids are playing, some people are talking, some people are going here, going there. So you see all of that. When I close my eyes, I don't see any of that. It's still happening, you're still moving around and doing things, but I don't see that. When I open my eyes, then again, I see it. I see how you're talking, how you're laughing, and so on. So being mindful is just like opening your eyes, or not being mindful is like closing your eyes. It's still there, but you just don't see it. So if you're mindful, then you recognize kind of what happens in your mind when you see a nice thing with your eyes. So what happens then is when you see something that you like, you become attached, or when you see something that you dislike, then you have an aversion to it. Or when you hear something pleasant, you become attached, or when you hear something unpleasant, you have an aversion to it. So there's all kinds of things triggered in the mind by these sense perceptions. And the point to recognize is that these perceptions, the way we see things, is just kind of an expression of our own mind. It's nothing else but a projection of your own mind.
다들 기대니 나게 생긴 반얘기하라 되니도 공장도 다 가래 하고 요리세나스 가래 하고 연거리세나 생코는 오늘보다 맞다 봐봐 그리고 맞다 봐봐 빼는 거는 give a loss 기와이나 군준도 그래 뭐 give a loss 기와이나 군준도 돼요 뭐 생코는 빠다디 나 give a loss 다 나는 뭐 give a loss 다 되는 거는 군준도 깨끗이 문제고 애들은 깨끗이 있고 맞다 봐라니 이거 생코는 맞다 봐라니 인사 된적이 있어 다들 가래지는 맞다 버리겠어 그 생코는 내로 코랑 안 보이네 생코는 내로도 얼마 탐지를 잡아 얼마 탐지도 잡아 인자 다른 로버가 다른 지난 남도 가래지는 된 줄로 같아 그 생코는 힐때 두고요 힐을 맞을 찾기 다른 때 남도 로버가 찾아 저 지난 남도 기본 남도 이나는 뭐 기본 남도 이는 저 로버가 기본 남도 이나리 동학 남도 이나리 대야 로버가 내 탐지고 줄로도 어디 가래지는 줄고요 레스나스 그런 생고 안 보이니까 묘모 받아 잡아 되니 동반이 받더니 하고요 그래서 that's 그 센트만 얘기할 때 되니도 소 하고요 맞다 남주가 해당지게나 공내리 선도 나 해당지 나 해당하면서 나 진짜 받치거다 nga chado jina nga chado jesa tini tidina be hiwiji te chiyo nga zimba chiyo yena ngupo sen kurang te chukuyo ma te lopor chadi te lopor chadi nga zo tara dimba nye goma jana te lopor yinba ha goma te ngune nga te yin samdero di jabin chunglo wada soba jabin chunglo wada dimba nye ga te ngune lopor bari te ngune te rangi chukuyo ma re sang tiyan ma taba re sang tini tsir nga sem dimba nye ga tam te tiga rana kwa kurang te lopor yinba te rana nga ngon chulo wada ngon chubal tene sem kurang rangi kurang nelo tumba nye tini ha tiden meko yores te kare hiyo dosine tara nga dimba hiyo ga nani tara taptoku topzang gupu dimba seyate dinan nuku yores ti tini nga ke ta nyamni se rwa nyom mupo anga mando wachi ta nga nga ti namshi tsoro ki jisi manda wachi rwa nga ke semna nga ke takbo yapo ja takbo yapo ja ngene gom jana 다 공잡 냠는 문도 냠는 채나 탑톱 거라 톱자게 돼 산지지 공판시 봐 근데 탑톱 그때는 돈 내로부터 탑톱이 딘바 근데 산지지 공판 토바 톱지 유 봤더니 뒤에는 고유를 들쓴 거도 어서
So when you practice this mindfulness of the mind, what is the thing that you realize by doing that? You realize that the mind also is impermanent.
That's good. I 60 class. That's good. 빼야나 다랑한도 디 신립바도 좋게 되나 신립바도 좋고한도 답지시 지인데 잘라 아자 그래 제그링 라면도 존존네 존데 나칼 프리야요 남들 줘야들 하고서는 그저기 가래지 하고 거 답지시 힘조세 단들 잘라는데 늘 지지 또 지지 저 든지 지지는 하면 남칼 프리야 그저 하고서다 근데 잘라 뭐들 잘라들 니바테 요바 하고서다 잘라 제도서 니바 요바 다랑은 느낌 총차 세야로 다들 제 잠을 때는 니바 침보서다 그때 답지 힘주선 뒤주도들 니 잘라 텔 니바테 요는 되니 저 jorwa시나 그분들 침보 인거들 하건데 그때 존트니 뱀밤다 남컬 보여 남들한테는 뭐라도 참 제조 그런서 리바 때 매서스는 힘주게 되니 주도도 저라고 열어서 이 티나히 나한테 샘 인반 얘기가 해야 돼. 나고 샘은 답지시 힘주시 지금 힘주시 오늘 샘코는 뭐라지 동반이 그라 라지 뭐를 봐. 샘코를 짱마 그런 쇼아인 봐. 바고 뒤든 당연히 뒤든 다대야 제땅송 아니나 산지지 공판시 봐. 뒤든 연구 요바 되네 하. 왜 되네 된대 연구 사례에서
I'll start over. So when you practice the mindfulness of the mind, the thing that you will understand then is that the mind itself also is impermanent. So if you have a virtuous, a good thought, that will change. That's impermanent. And also a negative thought will change. So nothing will always stay. It actually changes very quickly, moment by moment. All these thoughts constantly change because the mind is impermanent. And so why is it impermanent? How can we be sure that the mind is impermanent? It's actually because the real nature of mind is completely stainless. So the actual nature of mind is without any defilements, completely pure. And because that's our true nature, and anything that arises has to be momentary and temporary because it's not our true nature. So all these thoughts are bound to change because they're not our true nature. So therefore, virtuous thoughts, non-virtuous thoughts, good and bad states of mind, they just come and go because they are not our true nature. If they would be our true nature, they wouldn't come and go. Our true nature, which is always the way it is our empty nature, the mind that is empty. So when you practice mindfulness of the mind, this is what you ultimately realize. So ordinary people, for example, ordinary people identify with how they feel. So for example, if you get angry, you think that I'm angry. That's what I am. I'm angry. So you cling to that, you identify with it. Or I'm jealous. So that's what I am. I identify with jealousy. But actually, all of these do not really exist in our mind. They're just temporary, coming and going. That's not what we actually are. If you don't meditate, then you don't recognize that. You just think that's what I am. I am that. And whatever you feel, you identify with that feeling. When actually that's just a fleeting moment that comes and goes and not what you really are. But you can only see that when you meditate. Then you see that, oh, actually, this is all just coming and going. It never really stays. It's impermanent. So it's not what I really am. So through meditating, you find out what you really are. And that is, we call the true nature of your mind, which is an empty state. And so of the four truths, the Four Noble Truths, this is connected to the third one, which is the ultimate attainment, and that is the truth of cessation. So by practicing mindfulness of the mind, you're kind of abiding in the state of cessation, where you're not becoming controlled by the afflictive emotions, where you're not following the various sense perceptions, the 6 sense perceptions, where you just look after your mind, you just protect your mind and you keep meditating. And ultimately, you will find that this will lead to enlightenment, meaning that you ultimately will see what you really are. You will see the ultimate truth. So that is what we call this ultimate enlightenment. And so here you understand that this is something I can actually attain by practicing this way. It's just like, for example, in science, scientists have analyzed different things, different substances, different metals like iron and different kinds of metals and different substances. And they have realized, well, if we put this and this together, we have an airplane and that can fly. And so how did they come up with that idea that we can actually produce something that can fly in the air? It's because they analyze and examine over and over again until they realize that actually if you put the different combination of things, if you put those together, then this is what we have in the end. So by combining different things, they realized that these things actually have certain qualities. They have a power that can be generated. Or for example, that's also how they have created atomic bombs and nuclear bombs. They realized when these kind of like metals and substances are put together, then it has that kind of power. And so that is why we have airplanes that can fly, we have cars, we have bombs and so on. It's because of all this analyzing and finding the power of things. And it's quite similar with practicing mindfulness of the mind. We keep analyzing, examining the mind, and you realize what the mind actually is, the power that it actually has. And what it is that you will find is that its essence is empty and it does not actually inherently exist. There's just this clear, empty like mind. And that is then a very kind of peaceful state. And once you see that, you just improve on that and keep practicing, because by seeing that, you realize that this is how I can attain that state of enlightenment.
Yipati chutimanyava yapati dosi. Chusina karisin, chusina ananso, zunging the chutamchil call, zung year, then ananso zuda ro, kumbonga la suba, zunging chu. Tan dordina, unzub chutan tondam, unzub tan tondam ye, the dark or chunan, so do you listen?
And then next we come to the mindfulness of phenomena. And so that refers to any phenomena. So on the relative level, there's various phenomena that we perceive, like form, sound, smell, touch, the 5 aggregates. These are the relative phenomena. And then there's also ultimate phenomena. So this is no, all here we mean all the phenomena, relative and ultimate.
아때 맞아 다 곰자요. 곰자한테 근데 중심이 취탐 제가 마치 생각 맞춰볼게요. 말 성을 찹돼요. 찹돼도 되니 단 도드는 거 곰자. 아 이제 지금 곰자한테 다 나게 느낀 다 중심이 취칼에 열로 뛰는 거 곰자나 초를 랑게 따라 다른 모든 것은 로성을 따라지 진반 얘기가 좀 더설을 뛰는 데 밥란도 쏟 뛰는 곰자나 초를 단 도드는 데 곰자네. 생맥 뛰는 것도 되니 생맥 빠때네. 근데 지금 곰 작을 사이에서 다 열라 뛰는 거 곰자나 초를 랑을 뛰는 곰자나 초를 다또 곰자한테 누구라 가라 하고서 당한테 슈탐 경원에 답답히 세심조센지 그러고더라. 답답히 심조센 등안에 거라인지 되니까 님밤 마드바세야. 남중하나서 다 세팅아 시방아서 쉬위진 진도 그러나 시바치. 열 시바치 나서 있다. 낭진버센나 열 종을 열들이 열 대탐지는 가서 중심이 신나는 때문에 이상하게 되는 얘는 진바치네. 근데 지는 가서 대초 님반진 거다. 님반진에 되니 대라 가서 대 셈영로 걸어. 대라 다 쳐반하는 대거다 되는 다 추진반이 말 잡을 때는 되니 또 근데 담봉하고 공자 되는 봐 인데 되니 답지시 심조시 답지시 심조시인데 당연히 나게 나가 답지시인데 따라 나 시바치 조금이다 다 시바치 먼저 나 시다 시바치 답지 심조 시비 제대로 센팅반 얘기하더니 시비 심조 세차다 다 추진반 얘기 때는 차 지요다 때는 차면 차왔을 때 다시바 조금 맞대 다시바지 라고요 맞다 가능하게 다 정진 스탠드 정말 너무 열 정킹이 다 너무 열된 가서 맥들이 상고 남긴 가서 맥게 조게 다 되니 오늘 건 진바시지 다 열진 가서 셈는 셈가 시바지 가서 요리 상고다 매 그런 뛰는 게 더 까로 마오 임바더니 하고도 이는 더 까로린도 더 마오린도 선 답보장 셈가 시바지 가서 너무 야가리는 너무 도와도 삼인지 타중인지 가서 셈 시바지 나는 지 요리 상가 시바 단진지 요리 땡한테 요리 상가 근데 다들 답지지 힘주세요 오늘 진코 더 야가린 더 도와리 삼인지 지다고 답보장이지 요리 답보장이지 오늘 진짜 그거야 맞다 답보장이 진짜 조금이 좀 맞을바인 하고입니다 맞을바인 바테 하고 다음에 다시바니 다시바치니 맞을바인 바테 되는 하고 사리스 가래진 다시바 맞을바고 다 돈이 좀 하고 너기는 아저다 다 셔네스 남통도 때문에 아주 답지시는 데는 남이 돈도 세지 요로 다 너들은 뒤때는 아주 달아 그 다음에 뒤때는 김반이 야전이 아니세 봐 근데 다음에 돈 근데 쟤는 하고 요사리스
So when you practice the mindfulness phenomenon, so there's actually nowhere where there's no phenomenon. So all of these phenomena that we perceive as subject and object in this dualistic way, they are everywhere, pervading everywhere. And so for this reason, you can use any of them as your support for meditation. You can also use one of the previous 3 applications of mindfulness or any apparent phenomenon. You can meditate on that as your focal object. And so whatever it is that appears, it's all actually the same. It's a phenomena, and it does not inherently exist. So therefore, it can be really anything, any phenomenon that appears to you. And so the way to practice this is to understand the nature of that appearing phenomenon. So you analyze it, and you find that it does not inherently exist. So mainly the reason why things appear that way to us is because of our dualistic perception, which comes basically from our belief in the existence of a self. So we have a strong belief in there is me, I exist. And because of that, there's also other objects. So we believe in the existence of this inner mind, this me, the perceiver. And then what's separate from me is the outer object. And we have a strong belief that things exist in this dualistic way. And we are distracted by that belief. And therefore we dwell in all kinds of negative thoughts like attachment and hatred and so on. So when you practice the mindfulness of phenomenon, then you analyze whatever phenomenon appears. And it's mainly to realize that it all comes, the reason why it appears is because of the self. So you really analyze that I that you believe exists and find that an I does not really actually exist. So we already spoke about the mindfulness of the mind, which is quite similar, but this is just more subtle. We really get to the root of it, this I, the self that we cannot find. So it's about realizing that subject and object do not exist separately and actually not separate. So we think that there is this perceiver, that this creator that sees a form or hears a sound, and we think that's what's there. There is that form, there is that sound, and I'm knowing it. Or for example, that thing is white, that thing is red, or that person is a good person, that person is a bad person. And so we are sure that this is how it is. This is how it is. And we also think that that's me. I exist. We think we really exist. And then if you analyze that through practice, you realize that all of these are just mental fabrications. It's better and worse, good and bad, and so on, self and other. All of that, the person or the one who thinks that it itself does not exist. And so through the meditation of the mindfulness on phenomena, you realize essentially that a self does not inherently exist. So what you really realize is the meaning of emptiness. And so, and this is also where shamatha and vipassana then actually become one in a way. So because your mind is calm and then you look at what actually is, you see that there is no self. So you realize selflessness through the mindfulness on phenomena.
다때 답들이 가서 다 팀바 니야 이었니 롭자 다 인지 때문에 그냥 아주 하고 있다 아주 냠니 지금 냠니스 내가 좀 남유 투삼 공스 남바기 용의 시도 투스 당할 팀바 니야 있어야 돼 간이 인다 아주 당부 투여로 투스 다 찾더니 다들 팀바 니야 있는 시스 때문에 리도 뭐도 다 나랑 바뀌지 쌈당다 어때 리다스 대가랑 리즈 타지 야바 많이 때문에 린도 담도 나랑 쌈노다 나랑 힘주시 쌈노다 근데시 다 때는 아주 쌈노다 같아 쌈노다 나랑 쌈노다 힘주시 다 쌈노다 때문에 린도 쌈바지 용거다 린도 담에는 대린도서 근데 다 쌈부터는 그 하고 되는 그 공자 다 공자다 공자 컵선 마성이나 아주 법사들을 터고요 맞아 찍기 되게 많다. 두바지 부분 되게 많아요. 쌈부터 답기시고. 쌈바지 부분 그리고 공자. 비스는 다 공마전 탑이 말이다. 같이 투바 같이 걔는 은행하고 다 공마전나. 공마전 바이나. 다 샘핀 토고 맞다. 너드나. 나는 힘자잖아 말은 샘핀 토고 무슨 공자니까 이 말을 얘기한다. 당하더니 미팅 반이가 지긴다. 대라 삼노타 낙센트 네차자 야셈네 탑지 유tin 반이 야르티 셈네 didn't all learn that to secondary in park or didn't all learn the money. Data the Matam into some didn't bring out it. He chopped some artists, Jonathan and communication, but Japan's in Bachimbo to this man, Jonathan to the sea. Or data the dark, sorting, I'm sorting by the yard gomja on, sorting to Bakomja on. When I turn them, young and soa, this showing a wheel, so what they reach the page you got. Then the tar, soa, the tamji, which is a manamaji, and took the pass around, took to say it. No move one general, Namju. Now some of the new move, soa con new move. No move one the general. Take this now, no, no mind, but you don't have to his conja. His conja, frankly, Torgis and Roma go at him, better than conja. 다 샘팀 반이가 샘팀 반이 디테네 다 샘팀 받을 때는 항상 다 샘팀 더 딘진 망한 샘팀 샘 딘진 망한사 나랑 이 맞지 영어로 싸움 망고 다 해요 대탐이 또 맞아 봐요 맞아 봐 샘거랑 맞아 버린 용진 취담이 거 맞아 버린 맞지 하고보다 당연히 맞아 버린 거 오늘 거 샘거랑 오늘 샘거랑 오늘 내로 거랑 오늘 샘짱 말이요 오늘 짱 대탐지다지 대화도 동안도 잡아당 정말 뭐뭐 임시고 뭐뭐 또 봐요. 디테니 하게도 이제 냠니시 같이 공자도지. 다 디테니 다지 추팅반이가 군사모탄 다만 공자보다 공자는 오늘 다 남중아서 나 시바치 줍도 유상고로 당연히 담이 있어야 돈이 가능하고 추팅반이가 되는 다 답지 심조스는 내가 시바치 남주 진인지 요런데 야간데 도와신 진지 종진게 추탐진 진킹 시바치 되나 좀 나인 상고로 다 텔레지 답지 심조스는 나 시바치 그 요마다 아주 하고는데 다 시바 맞아 봐인다 니티든 하고 근데스인데 공자한테 용하진 땅안 돼 소식하다 공자 용 배서 맞으면 근데 같이 때에서 핀 도를 만드시라 핀 침부 도를 말이지 다른 아저씨 쪼바를 뭐지 송을 로마 잡으면 오빠가와 랑게 셈 오빠가와 랑게 셈 오빠가와 랑게 셈셈이 따라 팀반이 야 이어를 되는 맛이 냠내신 좀 돈지 하고도 따르더니 나게 셈게 내로 하고는 셈내로 짱만이 봐 대하고 오빠가와 랑게 셈 또 까오리스 당하고 법정세 투삼신데 당이 생모 짱만이 봐 대하 오빠가와 랑게 생각이 다또 하고 선 삼다 생광 오늘 짱만 요 다때 하고 오빠가와 랑게 홍미 공부를 매지 빠르스 홍미 공부를 매지 당은에 나그 셈 짱만이 봐 하거든 때 용종은 몸자는 매절 시기를 마도 뇽무부터 봤다 뇽무부 왕 쇼로 남산 쇼로 남비 쇼로 바차 쇼침고요 디지선 라는 데니까 내가 진도를 쇼로 똑바로 가면 통는 공발 공지지 나 인반 얘기해도 공양 신양스지 않은 공지지거든 쇼치를 딴 거잖아 인반 얘기하게 다른 나누가 가래 하고서 때 쇼치를 야당 뇽무바디 때는 막 뇽무바디 막 쇼치는다 다디 도서 개발 로다 되니 다미게 돈도서 되니 숙제야 똑바가 돈을 공방 사왕이 인바 가르치는 아주 비뉴 뭐한테 쇼를 쓰나 똑바가랑 생내로 통을 되나 아 통요를 때 되니 사왕이 바신 남주 첸데 주요를 다랑한 소티 아 조다 더 리자치 요랑 아주 첸데 주요를 때 첸데 신이 차는 좋아 첸데 내가 총 그쪽으로 차 되니 뒤지서 양로다 뒤지서 나는 되니까 이랑도에 때문에 상황이 비행 식으로 비행 수도다 용발을 연구 연구원도 로로다 제일 연구다 상황이 연 팀per상 잡듯어 다 tin시 걸려다 이 녀무원 마셔 tin시 인바팅은 다 tin시 때는 이는 땅 앞에 해당도 왕도 쇼는도 대하고 나 차도 왕도 쇼는도 대하고 ngandu chaga wangdu shondu magi wangdu pe shondu sa didini ngaga tsutan bezosin nyamisi jinshi da hakon dini didini jinshi jungyong ta tindijini dini jinshi kusana ita ngansi shene gongku yunari shamtong gongku yunari dor dina ko jinshi kona ten roga da 그 shene gongku yunari chir jinshi di yunari palgo 다 지랑 함통 기 돈이 기 따와라 남이 기 따와 대탐 기 공부에나 지랑 나 진실이 고 진실 되게 때문에 당하게 따라 곰리스야지 여러 박차스야 곰리스야 나랑도 따라디 먹이와 다른 거한테 내가 먹이와 똑같이 해야 돼 먹이와 드비알 때 기본단 초와다 인코 초라니 초 말내 상으로 인 밤도 배 뒤나는 거라서 배지 먹이와 똑같이 내 상으로 그럼 매서 가는 거 그럼 항상 용어도 깨주거든 가야지 박차기 때문에 근데 좀 나한테 독소지가 진실 때는 대 같거든. 진실 때는 대다다 마셔지. 쳐라데 마음 때는 강바식 논에 되는 하나 쳐를 하자니 용마지 지도. 저 양의 값을 힘받 주는도. 저 값을 힘받 주고도. 왜 뒤난다? 나그 생각 똑바로 값을 힘받 주는. 값을 힘받 개로 소리 주는 거다. 쳐라지와 주는 진실이 주대. 준니도 가리. 진실. 진실이 때문에 그게 똑같이 남상태 뒤지서 만나지 개로 똑바. 대답 일단 난 진실은 그냥 가서 공개하는 단도되나 양님 중종거라 들린 사례에서
And so this is the mindfulness, there's 4 kinds of mindfulness, just in brief. And also that's something that we actually have to practice. So normally we speak about listening, reflecting, and meditating. And so we need all of those together. So we need to hear about those different ways of practicing mindfulness. And then once we have understood it, then we have to really think about it and analyze it. So this is what it says about this application of mindfulness. And actually, it's really true. That's actually what it really is. So we analyze it, we think about it. And there's this feeling of this feeling that comes where you feel certain that, yeah, this is how it is. And then based on that feeling of knowing the certainty, then you meditate. So you need those 3. Without all of these 3, you cannot attain the result. So one is not enough. Just having one is not enough. So it's not enough just to hear or understand something. You also have to think about it. It's not enough to just think about something. You also have to practice it. You have to meditate on it. So you need all of them together in order to gain a result. No matter how much you learn, if you never practice it, it's of not much benefit to you, even if you know all of that. So therefore, each and every day, it's something you have to apply to your life. You have to practice it. Every day you think about, for example, thinking, today I'm going to practice this kind of mindfulness, and I'm going to stay with it. So first, for example, if you think about the mindfulness of the body, then that day you think about how the body is composed of impure substances and how all the suffering comes from the body. And in this way, you reduce the fixation, attachment to the body. And you try to eliminate the clinging to this me being the body as much as you can. Or when you practice the mindfulness of feelings and you meditate, you meditate on those. You're being aware of all these feelings that arise, and you recognize there's all these feelings, and always kind of follow, are being carried away by all these feelings, especially the feeling of pleasure. I want to follow this. I want to get it. So now I'm not going to follow it, but I'm going to stay with stability and be mindful of that feeling. So normally we always follow, we are controlled by these feelings. And so mainly with feelings here, we really mean the afflictive emotions. We are carried away by our emotions, these feelings, and they take us anywhere. And then when you're mindful, you turn it around and you're no longer allowing them to take you. You won't follow them, and you no longer follow them. And so then there's the mindfulness of the mind. And then you realize that, so I'm constantly having all these thoughts. Now I'm no longer going to believe these thoughts in my mind because they're all impermanent. They come and they go. The mind itself is impermanent. There is no real self. I think that there is this self, but actually there's no self to be found here. There's all these phenomena of that we appear to us in this dualistic way, and all of that is impermanent. The mind is impermanent, but so these mental states are impermanent, but the mind itself, the essence of mind, is completely pure. And all these feelings of happiness and sadness and attachment and anger are just some temporary moments, which are not really like identify me. And so then this is what you focus on when you practice mindfulness of phenomenon. So normally you think that there is this me, we see it, we think it's really there, but now you realize that this me does not really exist. Or these feelings of good and bad, self and other, all of this does not really exist. So that's what you recognize when you make an effort in this meditation. And eventually it will become effortless. However, in the beginning, if we don't make an effort, then there will be not so much benefit because we have all these habits. So because these habits constantly take us for a ride, we need to make an effort to turn things around. Otherwise, there won't be any great results. Jigten Sungye said in the 7 verses of supplication to Tara, there's supplication to Tara. So it says that beings do not habituate the mind. So the mind is so difficult to realize. So in the Tibetan first, it says the mind is so difficult to realize. So that is that pure nature of the mind. It's so difficult to see the pure nature of the mind. First, we hear about it, we learn about it, we understand that the mind is really pure. And then we practice it, we realize it. So you have a certainty, you know, my mind is actually really pure. And then that prayer says, so the mind is so difficult to realize, even those who have seen it, seen that mind, they do not habituate it. So they see it, we see it, but we don't habituate it. We don't stay in awareness of it, because even though we see it momentarily, the next moment we are again completely controlled by our afflictive emotions. And that's because these habitual patterns of afflictions are so strong. They always take us, even though we see the nature of the mind. And that is why we have to make an effort. So that habit of mindfulness becomes stronger. And in this way, your awareness of what you really are increases, and the afflictive emotions and this fixation to a self, the belief in a self will decrease. And so in that prayer, again, so it says that even though they have seen the nature of the mind, which is so difficult to realize, they do not habituate it because they are lost in negative activities. So why do we not habituate to the mind that we have seen? Why do we always lose it? It's because we have this strong habit of affliction that always lead us to negative activities. And so this here means this lost in negative activities just means basically mundane things. So we are constantly caught up in what we see, hear, smell, and so on. We just follow that all the time. We're always distracted by all these normal activities, these mundane activities. So therefore, then the prayer concludes, so mindful Mother Goddess, please protect those beings. So sometimes we become angry, or then we become jealous, or we become attached to something. So all of that must be seen with mindfulness. So now I'm being angry, I'm being jealous, I'm developing desire. You make an effort in seeing that with mindfulness. When you practice shamatha for calm abiding, you actually, you always need mindfulness. So for calm abiding, you also need to be mindful so you don't become distracted. And then also for vipassana or the special insight, you also need mindfulness. You need to be mindful of the fact that there is no self. So in either way, you need to be mindful. So in the beginning, it requires more effort because the negativities and afflictive emotions just almost come naturally. It is just like a kind of a waterfall rushing down a river. If it's steep like that, it's very easy for the water to fall. It just falls on its own. And so just like that, it's very easy for us to be afflicted. It just happens on its own. We don't have to try. It happens on its own. We're just always afflicted. And that's because we have these imprints, these habits of being afflicted. And these habits are very deep. And that is why they just come naturally to us. And so the way to turn it around is through its opposite, which is mindfulness. So you're turning them around through a habit of mindfulness. Now, for example, if there is like a kind of a flood falling down from the mountain, and it's about to hit your house, if you just let it fall down and hit your house would be flooded. But instead, what you will do is maybe put a fence around, or maybe redirect the water somewhere else. And so similarly, you redirect the mind to something else, to something better. So first there is this kind of flow, this stream of negativity and negative emotions, and then you redirect that stream and turn it into something positive and practice that. So this is really what we do when we practice mindfulness.
Okay. Tinita dimba nyaya yu gom jatan tini ropsan tini jini shu dhruba yinsi. Ta gom jaba kabla tini lubo, lucho zungtang, namnang chu dunun saya chiyar. Tiyang pati chiransu sapa yinsari tini nga tiyang ropsa ti chiransu xio, tini namdiyo gom jadi nga kanga kandi di tego yumi. Tiyang yinsi got.
And so that in brief are the 4 applications of mindfulness. So how we practice when we meditate. And so now also when we meditate, there's a certain kind of posture that we assume, and that's called the 7-point posture of Vairocana. And so since there are a few new practitioners here, I'm going to explain this briefly.
담보 짝한데 도 되는데 남주다는 아주 창라대 곰자리 따라 강바 도지 주름 짜스 강바 주름 장다 도지 주름이나리 주정네 하 강바 저 주정자.
So the first one of these 7 is to have your legs in a crossed leg posture. So we call it the fully crossed, like a full crossed posture, or it can also be in like a half crossed posture.
강바 도지 주정 라니 냠야 치스 and this just
So then the hands are here in this the gesture of meditation, where you put your hands on your lap like this.
근데 뽕바 구효다 장스 데들이 제야 데 파안데 치.
Then the shoulders are like spread like a vulture's wing, so not like hunched like that, but like straight and back.
Yeah, 뭐 구효다 장. Then gat생 data science, then Javoya Gatsia Kato, the Gatsik Jambota, Konamna do you the tin and Sovina saw the Gatsik the couple de Peki chamber, and so you did the shit. Za down a long down a same jungle. Kota long the same kind of Java. And then Zadia Kato and the tin long the tin and a jambo lower long towers and the same corner. Near Pinto in your race.
And then next is the spine, your back. Your back should be completely straight like an arrow. And actually of the 7-point posture, that's really the most important one, is that you have a completely straight back. because it is that when your back's straight, then your channels are straight. And when your channels are straight, then the wind can flow smoothly through the channels, and that affects your mind. So these are connected to each other, interconnected. So when your back's straight and your channels are straight and your winds flow smoothly, and then that will have an effect on your mind. So you will be able to meditate.
근데 림바 인정 것은 일단 그 아무튼 림바 림바 지만 배양을 파서 요마데 카토 제대로 제대로 시망고게 지고 있어요. 그게 림바 인정 것이
Then your chin is slightly tucked in, so the chin is slightly lowered, so not completely like down, but not up, so that your chin is just slightly lowered.
이 약인데 자스 제가 제대야 약인은 폭탄치네 거기서 그냥 핀도 됐어요. 핀도 갈생하고도 공연 참석 같은 출마요런 출마 참석 용이하다 이거야 또 이거도 이 약인데 자스 사는 그 카카고 맞아요. 좋다. 되게 치마도 양을 이거야 쏠을 때스 핀도 이거도 왔어요. 민가도 어쨌든 그때 그 나나 추도 때를 그런 누가 짐스 먹고 이거요. 지난 따다르지 약간 이제 동다 괜찮지.
Then the next one is the tongue. So the tongue, it touches the palate, the roof of your mouth. And the purpose of that is that, so when in a normal state, then often we develop a lot of saliva, and that then also can lead to some sluggishness and sleepiness. And so when you put your tongue on the palate, the roof of your mouth, then the mouth will stay like moist, but it will not develop this saliva. And also that will help you not get too sleepy. So that's just a brief explanation. Actually, each of these 7 kind of points of the posture has a very specific purpose.
근데 소소든 저 라와도 야 센서도 시위 담대 봐야 많이 봐. 파 담대 봐야 많이 봐. 라와 비교거리죠.
And then the lips and the teeth and the lips are in a kind of natural position, so you don't make them too tight, so they're not like in a certain kind of position. You just let them be natural.
근데 맥 팝선데 맥이 마나 케이크 되는 용나마 용나단 이거 단도되는 이 공춘이 자는 게 주고는 공춘이 잔대 잔은 그냥 맥이 안 돼. 그 야마 되지 마나 되니마.
And then the eyes are gazing towards the tip of the nose, not really at the tip of the nose, but past the tip of the nose, about maybe like a feet or 2, like past the tip of the nose. So just a slightly lowered gaze.
다들은 같이 검자로 까불 때는 주보 유튜브인가 유튜브 때는 그 주보 담보 공지 맞아요. 안 되지 거예요. 다 돼서 시작다. 근데 다당한 공자 당할 리소야고 정도 때문에 리소야고 정 여하튼 리소야고 yan테는 나보다 셈 공자야. 순대 솔직히 그래서
So before we start meditating, we assume this physical posture, and that physical posture it's kind of relates it affects your meditation. So that is why pay good attention that before you meditate, you have a good posture, and then focus on your meditation.
다들이 지들이 공자 바이나 되니 등등 하스 등등지라고 등등지 공자는 다들이 지진 반 얘기하겠다 했더니 공자냐면 신들이 다 너들은 냠빠리가 용된 통기 인정이지 다 대답되는 공자는 그냥 냠면서는 당하고 용된 통기 드는 용거요레스 그러나 용된 가래를 산지긴 김바 쳤다만 김바 진이 비즈분 김바 당가서 무시 점저 라서부터 솔로 미유 마제장 용된 탐지 다 드는 용거다 공자가 되는 요레스 용된 당가서 수문남고 초 이시게 초세 소에 공자 받기는 요레스 사케게 되는 가게 융하게 되는 게와도 소사는 빼야 우리 대만이 봐야 나게 생각되는 게 셈짜마 신이다 공지하는 게 대바이나 아니 이 밤이 되는 경우 더 정말 거야 정말 되는 토부여래 가해서는 남중아 죽지면 너무 뭐하고 죽었다 저기 단진데 너무 맞지 때문에 비주야 다 공지한테 셈짜마 내 영어로 셈짜마 내나 다를 빠살와 아 셈살와 셈쇼와 셈대와 정말 되는 토부다
And so by practicing mindfulness, the four kinds of mindfulness, samadhi, the meditative state of absorption, all good qualities come from that. For example, the Buddha's qualities of omniscience, of knowing how things really are and what they really are, like all these things that exist. Also, certain supernatural powers like clairvoyance and so on will naturally arise, even if there's no intention of cultivating these qualities. They will just naturally come from meditation. So in our practice, generally, we speak about we have to accumulate both merit and wisdom. And actually, everything really comes from meditation, merit and wisdom. Of course, if we practice if you do some good things with body and speech, we accumulate merit, that's excellent. But actually, everything comes from the mind. If you just realize that the mind is pure and you stay within that state and you meditate, all the good things that you want, all good qualities come from that. So normally our afflictions just run wild, and there's all these thoughts and belief in the self. But when you meditate, that doesn't happen. The mind is pure. You stay within that pure state with clarity, with clear awareness. So you're sustaining this state of peace and clarity and of a blissful state. And that is why all good things come from it.
다 다른 게 중상들은 나왔을 텐데 스티니 그건 지나서 판 나왔을 때 까만 니시는 빠도 검잡셔 까만 니시 까만 아래 진반 얘기 기대를 까만 아래 그 검잡 니 가는 것도 직다 쇼스 니 뒤때는 좋아요나 사는 지나서 거요는 그래도 좋아 미나 지나서 하 고되는 때문에 야벌 때 중전에 니 마음 봐 대답이 중전에 검잡 되는 게 소치네 하고 요래서
And we stopped the teaching here today. And now this evening, when you go home, everyone should meditate for 20 minutes this evening. So do 5 minutes for each of those 4 applications of mindfulness and practice for 20 minutes and really reflect on them. And if you have any questions about it, you can bring those questions tomorrow. If not, then that's also good. If you understand, that's excellent. Then you just continue with that and just continuously make an effort and persevere in the practice.
meditation 수남들의 잠재의 관계 범람의 변화 범죄의 제가는 주 발언도 지분조런조와 조와이쇼 인정발바의 제단의 진바도 공도정보 대한 대변대 대다 공제 있었다로 기원도 다탐지라도 다다 공대 담기제 주선도 서바던 유배계의 자원의 다다 심진 담기 힘들 나나미 양다바주 배산주 름보제 토바제 리제 이장주 sem주 름보제 마지 마나 지제지 지반 양발 미바 고니 건도 부와이쇼 오마니 베메 Thank you very much, everybody. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Inala.
See you tomorrow.
Mm,
Thank you.
mm,
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Lydia.
Yeah, good morning, good night. Mhm.
Tomorrow, who know coming, then I give you this, okay? If tomorrow coming, then I give you tomorrow. Okay. I understand.
Bye.